All right. Hello, everyone. So today we're going to be talking about sexual harassment in the workplace. And we're going to be using this article on The Office and Philosophy as a kind of case study for several different views about what makes sexual harassment wrong. Okay, so what makes sexual harassment wrong, right? So our author points out that Michael Scott is clearly a sexual harasser, right? And he is an indiscriminate harasser. He harasses a number of different people in the office, including Pam, Phyllis, Angela, and Ryan, the temp. Um, he constantly awards Ryan the hottest in the office for the Dundies, right? And he slaps him on the butt. And so there's clearly sexual harassment going on with Michael Scott and his character, right? So, so the U.S. law actually doesn't give us very much guidance on morally assessing Michael Scott's behavior. And this is because in 1986, the Supreme Court ruled that sexual harassment is sexual discrimination, right? So where a man or a woman discriminates against a member of the opposite sex in virtue of sexual comments. That's what sexual harassment is, according to our law and our legal system. Okay, and so why is this a problem? Well, Michael could argue in court that his behavior was not discrimination since he harasses Pam and Ryan both equally, right? So he's not targeting women, right? Rather, he is just being a general harasser or an indiscriminate harasser, meaning that it doesn't matter what one's gender is, he will still harass them. So this raises the question, clearly Michael's behavior is wrong, right? That's not really up for debate. But what is it that makes it wrong? So our author says that a lot of times we believe that things are wrong, and maybe we know that things are wrong without understanding the reasons that make them wrong, right? So we may think that it's wrong to murder someone, say, even though we may not be able to well, what is it that makes murder wrong? We still know that murder is wrong, right? And so we're going to be doing, our author, Jerome, points out that we're going to be doing an inquiry in applied ethics to try and figure out what is it that makes sexual harassment wrong. So here's the first tentative answer, is that sexual harassment is a kind of wrongful communication, right? So we communicate ideas and content, right? Sentences with propositional content or gestures to one another. And this communication can be either right or wrong. So Edmund Wall, he says that the definition of sexual harassment is that, his definition of sexual harassment avoids discrimination. So unlike the U.S. Court, right, the U.S. legal system identifies sexual harassment as sexual discrimination, right? His definition does not appeal to discrimination at all. So here are four necessarily and jointly sufficient conditions for what makes a sentence or an action sexual harassment. First, a message is communicated from one person to another. We can say the communicator and the hearer, right? So the communicator communicates a sentence to the hearer. The hearer does not consent to the message, right? Look, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to hear this, right? The communicator nevertheless communicates the message, even though it's not consensual. And finally, the hearer feels uncomfortable or emotionally distressed in virtue of the message that's being sent from the communicator, right? So when you take all of these things together, right, they are then jointly sufficient for an act of sexual harassment, right? So So, and you got to have all four of them present. And when they are all present, then they're sufficient for an act of sexual discrimination or sexual harassment. Oh, okay. So this runs into a problem case. Consider Christmas goose. Dwight has accidentally killed a goose at Christmas time. He brings it to the office to make Christmas dinner for everyone. Everyone is offended by both the dead animal in the office and his communication about cooking and slaughtering the goose for dinner. Even though people express their offense, he nevertheless claims that is a Christmas miracle. So Wall's definition, so it seems like, according to Wall's definition, that Dwight's exclamation that this is a Christmas miracle is a wrongful instance of communication. First of all, we have a message being communicated. We have hearers who don't want to hear about the goose. We have a communicator that insists on talking about the goose. And then we have the hearers who feel emotionally distressed, namely by having a dead animal in the office, right? Okay, so it seems like on this definition of a wrongful communication, Dwight's exclamation, "This is a Christmas miracle," counts as a wrongful communication. So Wall's definition includes more things than just sexual harassment, right, as wrongful communication. And so maybe this is like, and so that means that Dwight's exclamation about the goose is like on par with sexual harassment instances, like what Michael's doing, right? But, there seems to be something especially egregious about sexual harassment, not just about any other kind of harassment, right? So this definition seems to miss out on what the real problem is with sexual harassment. There's a second problem that he brings up, is that when it comes to this fourth condition, right, we feel emotionally distressed in virtue of the message. Some people have different thresholds for feeling emotionally distressed, right? So, for instance, Angela, who seems to be emotionally distressed all of the time and offended by everybody's words and comments. And then someone kind of sleazy like Meredith, right, is probably has a much higher threshold for being offended than, say, Angela does, right? And so that fourth condition seems to be contingent upon how individuals feel, right? And so you have to feel distressed in order for there to be an instance of sexual harassment, right? But it seems like sexual harassment could occur even though people just say have become kind of callous to it, right? Suppose that everybody just kind of tolerates that sexual harassment is going on, and they're just like, okay, he's just doing this again, whatever, right? There's still sexual harassment, even though there's no emotional distress on part of the hearer, right? Okay, and so that seems to be a problem. We can have sexual harassment where the hearer does not feel emotionally distressed. Okay, so consider a second tentative definition of sexual harassment. Sexual harassment as sex discrimination. So sexual harassment is wrong, according to Catherine McKinnon, because it perpetuates the interlocked structure by which women have been kept sexually to enthrall men at the bottom of the labor market, right? So the idea here is that, look, women are kind of here for men's pleasure, right? And sexual harassment perpetuates these norms about women being present merely for male pleasure. And so sexual harassment keeps women as the objects of men's sexual attention. And in addition to this, or maybe in virtue of this, it maintains a kind of dissonance, a kind of power dissonance, and which is an oppressive power structure, where women are less, hold less power in the workplace because they're valued merely by being sexual objects and not necessarily what they produce, right? So for instance, in The Office season 7, I think, when D'Angelo becomes the new manager of The Office, he's accused of being a sexist. And that's because, not necessarily because he makes comments at the women in the office, but merely because he's interested in valuing women merely on the basis of, or he doesn't appreciate that women hold positions of power in the office, and only includes men in his inner circle, right? So there are a number of women department heads, and as a result of the, or he doesn't meet with them to talk about how their departments are doing, and merely meets with men, right? So even though this isn't sexual harassment, it is still sexism and maintains a kind of power dissonance in the office place, right? And so sexual harassment also does this. It maintains oppressive power structures. So here's a problem. On this account, Ryan, and potentially Oscar as well, who is also the victim of Michael's sexual harassment, Ryan can't be the victim of sexual harassment. So according to these two guys, women cannot commit sexual harassment, nor can men be the victims of sexual harassment. But it still seems like what Michael does to Ryan is like really like a problem, right? So we want to be able to say or claim that Michael maybe not oppresses, but definitely sexually harasses Ryan, right? Okay. Oops. So he wants us to take these two views together, but he also argues that both of them miss a vitally important detail about sexual harassment. So the idea here is that employees deserve to be judged on the basis of merit and job performance alone, right? So there's a transaction that goes on between an employee and a company, right? Namely, the employee does the job that they're supposed to be doing, that the company tells them to do, right? And then the company, or excuse me, then the employee can do additional things, right, that go above and beyond the basic threshold of what needs to be done in order to get recognition, job letters, career related goods, right? Maybe a bonus, maybe a raise, right? So employees have an incentive to do more than they're supposed to do, right, in order to get additional recognition. And so they are entitled to be assessed merely on the basis of job performance, right? So their employees are within companies in order to perform various tasks and do various job-related activities, right? And so when they are evaluated, they deserve to be evaluated merely on that basis. Okay, so, and then when it comes to people going above and beyond, like think of Dwight, who's like always constantly doing everything with super duper diligence, right? So sexual harassment undermines this recognition because it communicates that the only things that are valuable about an employee are their sexual features and not necessarily their job performance, right? So when someone is sexually harassed, the idea here is that you are being valued, or that person is being valued merely on the basis of being a sexual object, right? Or merely on the basis of being sexually attractive, and not on the basis of their job performance. So the thing that's valuable, job performance, is unrecognized or ignored in virtue of sexual harassment, right? And so this disincentivizes, so the lack of recognition that follows from sexual harassment actually disincentivizes people from going above and beyond in the workplace. So this is an interesting thing. And if this is right, then we can say that Oscar and Ryan are potentially sexually harassed, right? So their job performance, even though Ryan doesn't do a very good job in his performance, right? Doesn't do a very good job. He's still not being recognized as an employee, right? He's primarily being recognized as the object of Michael's sexual pleasure. Okay, so that is all that I have for you today. Thanks for listening to this lecture.